Hey Spartans, Josh here. A quick content note before we get into this week's episode. You're about to meet one of 5 guest speakers that have courageously volunteered to contribute their experiences, knowledge, and support to the ongoing mental health crisis our nation is facing. For the whole month of May, I will be rolling out a 5-episode series interviewing survivors of suicide, as well as leaders in mental health awareness. We're sharing our stories of recovery in hopes that they save at least one life and hopefully many more. If you're not in the headspace to receive these stories and testimonies, please stop the podcast here. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourselves. Let's go. I want to bring up a couple topics on the same vein because I had a conversation with Kevin Hines, who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and now his life's mission is to get to 0 suicides across the globe. If we're truly trying to end the stigma, we gotta start talking brain health and brain pain versus mental health, and because people automatically have that negative connotation with it. They not only need to hear about it, they need to care about it because it affects all of us. Or it will affect you if it hasn't affected you yet. Either be your own mental health or someone you love.
You have to be educated on the signs of someone that's going through that.
Well, look at your peers and your friends. Who looks like they're struggling or isolating? Because if you don't, someday in the future, you're going to remember that moment. You're like, I should have done that.
I want to be the guy with that fire extinguisher and unlock a bunch of other doors. I'm like, there's a different way.
Yes. I think we would all love to be that in someone's life. Now, it's not like a hero complex. It's an actual, just loving. Love conquers hate.
Absolutely.
This is really enlightening. It's like, people need to hear about this.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership, everybody. And if you're with us today, you are seeing 2 gentlemen sitting next to me. That means we have Leadership in Review. If this is your first time tuning into Spartan Leadership, we have 2 different formats to the show. One is typical interview style, where I'm interviewing another leader, another influencer in the world that's having a big impact. And in one time a month, we do these leadership and reviews where we are assessing the current state of our nation, of political leaders, of local leaders, leadership in general, and doing so over a fine cigar, potentially having a contentious conversation and showing you how to do it in a respectful manner so that we still come out friends. We believe that to be the American way. So to my right, I think maybe the first time to my right, we got the greatest man alive, Emmanuel Whitfield.
GMA.
And introducing for the first time, if you're not watching us on video, to my left is Tom Farley. Welcome to the show, bro.
Oh man, this is really nice. You might not get me out of here.
Yeah, it's a comfortable seat, right?
This is good. This is where I like it.
So I gave, we're smoking Cuban cigars tonight. We want to start with that. I gave these guys Qual Dorce, Senadores is what I gave these guys. And I am smoking a cigar from 2014, a Ramon Alones, regional from Spain. So we're enjoying these cigars immensely. It's a treat to be able to smoke some fine Cuban tobacco.
Indeed.
So we're going to enjoy these and get right into it tonight. Our topic for the month of May is, as you know, we've been focusing on mental health as May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So the leadership and review that we're going to talk about is from a national, state, and local level. We're going to talk about some wins and some failures, but we're recording this a month in advance, and we just this week had a shooting, another school shooting, tragic shooting down in Nashville, or just outside Nashville, I believe it was. So we wanted to discuss some of that and some of the leadership or lack thereof that we're seeing as it pertains to these shootings that are happening all too often. Mr. Farley, what are you seeing from both sides of the aisles, leadership or lack of leadership as it pertains to this hot topic on gun violence?
Well, I mean, it's the same rhetoric we're hearing over and over again.
Yeah.
That's problem one. And that's got to tell you something's got to change, because the reality isn't changing. Your response and dialogue around it isn't changing. So how do we get out of this?
Yeah, like what's going to change if like it's the same thing over and over again?
Right. Well, I think it's how you look at it. You know, it's the empathy. It's, you know, what are we losing? You know, first of all, you know, just however you look at it, like, you know, how much more pain do we have to take on this? You know, this is not good for anyone. Now, however you think about it, it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful no matter what it's painful to even argue about it.
Yeah.
And so the more we do that, the more disconnected we become. And that's the biggest problem, especially post-COVID, and I'll talk a lot about this, is the lack of connection. And we're not, and when I see something like this, initial like this, I immediately see a lack of connection.
Yeah, agreed. So, of course, the Democrats jumped on right away saying that calls for bans on assault rifles. It's interesting, you're right, that side just, here's to me is like, I truly believe there's some evil characters in our government. And I don't think people are necessarily ready, majority of people aren't ready for that conversation. And it needs to start happening. It's like there's actual, because I don't think that most people, and Emmanuel and I have talked about this, but I don't think most people want to believe that there's actual evil in our government, because most people want to believe that we're good people. Mm-hmm. Right? So I know you as a good person. I know you as a good person. Most of us would like to believe that our neighbors and everyone around us is good people. And we don't want to believe that there's actual evil
right
in our world, first of all, but let alone in our government. And it just seems to be that, for me, the reason I bring that up is, are they activating people to actually carry out these shootings? I don't know. I'm not accusing.
Damn.
I'm not accusing.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what I'm saying.
Well, but you know, there are, you know, somebody, I mean, if you look at it one way, somebody's profiting from it. So you know, there's some benefit there to some faction, whether it's, you know, whatever it is. And I'm not talking about, like, you know, gun manufacturers. I'm talking about, like, you know, causes or whatever. Some, you know, whatever side you're lined up against, there's money behind that argument. And so you're feeding that argument, you're feeding that money stream. You know, that's kind of where we're going down.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's a tough conversation for us to even have. Like, for me to utter those words, I want to try and be careful, because I don't want to get myself in trouble, first of all. But it just seems too convenient that anytime a gun issue comes up, there's a shooting to back it up.
Well, you know what it is? You know what it really is? Yeah, I know that. Well, that's true. But and I've talked to politicians, and I've heard all too often, you know, why aren't we doing this? And I've heard literally, you know, friends of mine have said candidly, it's like, well, if I voted that deep, you know, I would lose votes, and I would, you know, then be out of office.
Not be reelected.
I'm like, so there's no political will. It really comes down to protecting its job protection. I need to protect my job, so I need to make certain people happy, and, you know, therefore, you know, who suffers is, we're not, you know.
We all suffer.
We all suffer as parents, as human beings that have a heart, that care about these families that just tragically lost their children or their spouses for the teachers that died.
Here's an interesting idea. Why does it have to be a ban? Why can't there be, like, a moratorium until we figure this all out? Or at least like a grandfather, you know, something, pump the brakes. But this extreme, it's got to be one way or another. Is there a middle ground where we say, hold on, let's just pause, you know, this proliferation, whatever we want to, until we figure out some, and maybe take some of that money and devote it to mental health care.
Yeah. No, that's not a bad idea there. I want to get Emmanuel's take, because I have an answer to that.
That's tough. I think politicians create problems that they don't want to fix.
Or that they're the only ones that they claim can fix it.
And they don't have a clue of how to fix it. And I think they don't want to fix it. It's almost like you're talking about banning something. That's like telling every driver with mental health or whatever. I mean, some things are the inevitable. When a speeder is reckless on the highway, it's gonna be a reckless outcome. You know, you can't ban everybody from a gun. It's not the gun, it's the individual. And I come from I look at it on a street level. When there's no punishment, I'm looking at like street crimes, gang violence and stuff like that. When you have a gang like the Republicans and the Democrats, they're all corrupt. It's like going to the Crips and Bloods and saying, how can we fix these neighborhoods? They're there to destroy the neighborhoods. You can't fix a problem with corrupt people. You know, it's just crime without a punishment is going to create more crime. I look at stuff on the streets. When you let a kid get away with gun conviction after gun conviction, you bring those felonies down to misdemeanors. They're going to continue until they find a punishment for these crimes. You know, if it was so easy to rob a bank, don't you think banks would be robbed every day? But every kid, where I come from, no. You run up in a bank, you're getting 15 years off the top. You don't hear about banks getting robbed every day. If they only gave you 6 months in a misdemeanor for banks, I might be having a ski mask on a little later on today, you know. So it's just our politicians most of them are all corrupt, and they don't want any solutions. It's almost like Big Pharma. You think they want a cure for something? No, they don't. No. You think the police and these FBI and all of this, what if everyone was good? Their job security would be gone overnight. They like that. They have to have a reason to have probation officers, prisons. They don't want prisons empty.
You know, but again, I think the focus is on the top down. You know, like let's regulate this and let's laws on this. And again, we talked about before, like the real driver is mental health.
Yes.
You know, and so
we got to get to the root.
Get down there and have it flow up.
Right. And so we're going to talk a lot about mental health. I want to give you some context on Emmanuel because you guys don't know each other well. He has a gun conviction, cannot own a gun ever in his life again. If he's caught with a gun, he's straight back to federal prison.
Forever.
Yeah, I would never be able to have a gun. Probably was the best thing that ever happened to me. I can go bow hunting. I don't need a gun. If I probably would have had a chance to get another gun, probably wouldn't be here right now.
But here's the deal, though, is like it's already illegal to kill people.
You got a knife? You got a knife on you. You got a knife, don't you?
Nah, I use my Jedi mind tricks.
But it's already illegal to kill people. So the fact that we're, again, trying to treat a symptom instead of the root. So if we get to the mental health side of things, and just real quick on a solution, I actually got in a brief discussion with someone that I know leans left just via DMs today. And she asked me my opinion on like what a solution would be. And I was like, look, we protect our scumbag politicians and our scumbag Hollywood provocateurs with guns. Not all, Tom. Not all.
Not the comedians, please.
No, the comedians are good people. They're the only ones that control the truth. They're the ones that can tell the truth anymore. So it's interesting that we protect those people with guns, but we won't protect our most valuable people, which are our children, with guns. We have all these military people that you're working with, these military people that would give their life again for a purpose to protect something greater than themselves, that are highly trained, highly skilled, that we could put at our schools and actually give them a purpose again.
Wow.
And protect our most valuable asset, which is our youth. That's our solution. That's our middle ground.
Wow.
Everything's about money, though.
But, well, the thing about that is, and I talk to a lot of veterans, is like, first of all, and getting veterans, mental health is kind of like my thing now, but because we've taken humans and we have rewired them to do a job. And they did it, and they did it effectively, and they were over there. But now they're coming back. You've got to like step that back now. You got to get them being back human again. That's one thing. That's kind of the dynamic. You've rewired this person.
Yes.
You've got to get them back. And once you do that, once you do get them rewired and get them human again, then that might be a good idea. But until then, these are people that have been rewired to shoot, not to protect. It's really, self-protection, really. I mean,
Well, it's protecting the people next to them more than anything.
More than anything, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. That's the purpose I'm talking about. Is so yes, there would need to be training, there need to be mental health checks, there need to be all these different safeguards. But at the same point, I've trained former military in sales, and it took me a while to understand. And I literally would have conversations with them about, hey, so tell me this: you were, as a Marine, not scared to run into bullets. But you're scared to pick up that phone and call someone?
Oh, you are a genius, man.
But
and you had some good.
I had some great people, but I was really trying to understand. And what it was they were fighting for a purpose outside of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So them picking up the phone to call on a potential sale was for themselves. At least until I rewired to help them. No, it's for others. What we do in financial planning is for others, not you help people, you get paid to help people, right? So I had to do some rewiring, but it wasn't until I understood that the reason they were able to run into bullets wasn't for them. It was for a purpose greater than themselves. So I just think we're on to something there if we can actually, get the proper training and purpose.
I think you're right.
And actually protect our nation's most valuable assets, which is our youth. So the other piece of this that, is just interesting is, and when we talk about what I don't want people to confuse in this, because this person was transgender that did this shot, like when we're saying, I'm not trying to accuse transgender of being mentally ill. What I'm saying is mental health is at the root of anything that you go out and shoot someone. Like that is a problem. So I'm not trying to say that the transgender mental health, that's not my point here. My point is if you go out and shoot someone, there is a mental health issue. Or you're going to go walk into a school and try and kill kids. Right. There is a mental health issue that needs to be addressed.
Regardless of who you are.
Male,
black,
female,
white,
absolutely. That's just not,
I didn't want anyone to confuse that and try and hit me up in DMs later. Don't want to deal with that bullshit. So, anyhow, I want to get that out there.
Yeah, and another thing, when people try to score political points, murder is murder at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who they represent. And, all these politicians want to jump on this wagon and say, it's those guys, it's this guy. No, murder is murder, at the end of the day. I think the biggest thing is you can't have a bunch of mechanics trying to do brain surgery. So a lot of these politicians who try to come up with remedies and fixes for the nation, they have no clue.
Did you see
professionals.
Did you see the hearings with the CEO of TikTok?
Yeah.
Talk about not knowing anything about, in this case, technology. The questions that were asked were like, what? What? Do you know how this works?
That's what goes on in Hollywood, Washington, D.C. You got people who have no clue. You have Supreme Court
justices. Do, though.
You have Supreme Court justices who doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman.
It's interesting. You're right. The staffers do, and they do great research.
Yeah.
But then they get in front of the cameras, and all of a sudden the politicians lose that. Here are the fact they're looking for lost votes, and they're looking for they
or scoring public points.
Scoring public points, exactly.
Yeah.
They go off, the reservation with these wild things, trying to get a point in, a jab in, a soundbite. And these poor staffers, like, I gave you all the research. Like, where are you going?
I spent 6 years going to D.C. talking to people lobbying for the financial services industry. And I know you've spent a lot of time talking to politicians as well, Tom. But to be fair, the amount of issues that a politician has to deal with or that comes across their desk, it is impossible for them to be an expert in everything. That's why the staffers are there to help know that, hey, staffer 1, you're going to be an expert in these 3 areas. Staffer 2, you're going to be an expert in these 3 areas. And your job is to educate me, the politician, on what I need to know to be able to form a vote, which unfortunately nowadays is, well, just tell me what the Democrats say and I'll vote that way, and tell me that's the unfortunate part today. But I just want to be fair for the audience to know as well, because many haven't spent that time going to D.C. or even on the state level talking to these people. It's impossible for them to know everything.
Yeah, but regardless of it being impossible for them to know everything, their job is to lie. Their job. Some things you know to be true, and you've sold yourself to a political side.
Correct.
Where you can't come out and tell the truth, which can harm 1 million people, or it can harm a whole nation. Like voting for a war that you know is a corrupt war just because I'm on this political side. Or even doctor. I mean, it all comes down to the mighty dollar. You have to have a heart. When you have a heart, you will say, this job is no longer good for me. If I'm a doctor and I know I'm prescribing synthetic heroin, getting all of these people hooked, I'm not gonna prescribe it. But if you don't prescribe it, you're out of there. If you tell the truth, there's certain things you have to be a man about something. You have to put life before your position or your job. You know, just like dumb stuff. Oh, Obama wasn't born in the USA. As a man, you say, listen, we're not going to play that. If I can't beat you in the ballot box, I'm not going to cheat you. But you don't have that moral compass going around anymore. Democrats sat there and pushed this Russia stuff all the way to the end, knowing it wasn't true. You know, impeaching someone, beat me in the ballot box. I don't need, it's like taking steroids and saying you're the best on the planet. No, I want to get it fair and square, honestly. I don't want to cheat in anything in life. But it goes back to being in a gang. You think a gang's going to stand up and say, we're good people? No, they're going to lie and cheat and steal and do whatever they have to do to get to the top. And politicians do the same thing.
And hence my point is there's some true evil people that have made it to the top in Washington. So that's interesting. So I want to segue here.
Thank you.
I want to segue here because Tom's with us, has a deep experience. For those that don't know or can't recognize because you're not watching on video or haven't put two and two together, this is Chris Farley, the late great Chris Farley's brother. Tom and I have done a podcast and some other work together in our previous life, both of our previous lives, yeah. But we've known each other for some time. I have a deep respect for him and his knowledge, not only the work that he's done with his brother's foundation, the book he's written, but also the work he's doing today and working with veterans at Rosencrantz and mental health, big mental health advocate. So as we're sitting here going into the month of May for mental health awareness, I want to have someone else on to chop it up with us and assess leadership or lack thereof federally, statewide, and locally. So Tom, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Well, it's funny. I as you mentioned, since Chris died 25 years ago, I've been in schools and, talking, making speeches, and just being an advocate for, substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery. And was fine doing that for a long time. Then COVID hit, and I started to do a lot of podcasts with Hazelton up in Minnesota.
Which is where Chris, one of his treatment spots.
Yep, that's how I got hooked up with them. Chris got some real great help with them. And I said, well, let's do some stuff. And as we did viral stuff because it was COVID, and I kept hearing myself saying that, like, we've got a storm coming. People are going to be leaving COVID with behaviors they didn't have going in. Before we had a epidemic, before we had a pandemic, all this stuff. And the more I heard myself talking about what's coming, I said, I got to do more than just advocate and talk. I need to actually help get people into treatment. And as it were, the company I work for now, Rosecrans, who I had done work with in the past, said, we need somebody in Wisconsin. We're down in Rockford as our treatment facilities in most of our clinics. And they said, well, we got a clinic in Madison. We need somebody in Wisconsin that knows the state. And I'm like, that's me. Let me do that. Let me help get people into treatment, not just our place, but wherever it is. My job is to, if you need treatment, let me try and find a place, if it's not us, that's not the end of the story. I got to find a place.
Quick question about treatment. You always see treatment centers like for the rich. They'll go out to Malibu. Yeah. What about for the normal people that may be homeless? Do they have any public treatment or anything like that?
That's a good question. And we talked a little bit about that beforehand. There's plenty of treatment if you got money in this country. When I decided I wanted to go and do this work, I could have gone a lot of places, but. One of the things I heard about Rosecrans that I really loved was, first, it was nonprofit. Not that makes a difference, but they said, of our mix, at that time, I think it was 57% Medicaid and 47% commercial insurance. And that with COVID, that's even, we as our CEO said early on, he said, we'll take anyone that comes to our door and try to make it financially, we got to stay in business too. But we try to take, we find Medicaid, there's foundations, there's other state funding. So we do a lot of work, on the funding side to make sure people get treatment. And we got really special, treatment, programs and stuff. So I'm there because of all of that. That's what I needed to hear too.
Yeah. Anybody lobbying for like government? I mean, we can go support wars for billions of dollars. Yeah. We just don't invest back into the foundation of America. I mean, I would think like fortifying schools should be one thing. Like, I think they should have like bulletproof doors, and like you say, mental health should be one of the things available for a lot more people. As
we saw all of this, going back to the opioid, this settlement, all these funds. I've just heard so many, state agencies and politicians say, well, we're going to use opioid funds for this. I mean, even in our state alone, that money's been spent 20 times over, and we haven't even gotten
all the millions they got from Purdue Pharmaceuticals.
Well, nobody's even gotten the money yet.
Oh,
but
wow.
They've talked about we're going to use this money, and so, what one of the things I thought where it really needs is, you know how to put a resource officer, in the schools, protect it. The guidance counselors that we have in schools are the same people we had when we were in schools. They were trained to get us into college and help us with it. Yeah. They were not prepared post-COVID for what they've had to, what they had. Yeah. So I would say, what they need is that funding. Take that opioid money or find funding, but get some real clinical help in schools.
I think you make a good point. It's almost like the old school, the old guard, it's like a cell phone that hasn't been updated yet. They have no clue what's going on right now. And it's advanced. Kids are totally different than when we went to school. You get a little fight or someone felt a certain way, but kids go through a lot more, and they need to upgrade. They need more people that are more qualified for some of these jobs.
As I said, to that root, to the mental health stuff. I was at a school district meeting on prevention recently, and they were talking vaping is a big thing in schools now, and they were like, well, we've got, and they were, everything they talked about was all their prevention programs were detection based. Let's find it.
So reaction.
And I'm like, do you know what teenagers are like? Like if you're going to try to detect, you're challenging them to. They're going to find places to hide. Teens always have found places,
a way around
to work around. So if that's where you're meeting them, they're going to beat you every time.
They're more advanced. Try to outdo a teen on an iPhone.
Yeah,
I'm like, what?
So detection-based prevention isn't it? Yeah. You can bring on all the sniffing dogs you want. They're gonna get around that. Mm-hmm. So get to why are they doing this? Because they are isolated and they have all sorts of
It's an escape.
It's the only way they know how to manage the trauma that they're that's building every day.
That's a good segue to you and I's conversation about your brother. Is you didn't know 25 years ago that Chris's drug use was due to the mental health issues that he was facing. So talk a little bit about that and what you and your family have learned from that experience, because 25 years ago it was taboo and shameful.
Shameful, yep. You don't talk about it.
You don't talk about
behavior based. Yeah. Chris had a behavior problem, and he drank because he drank. Yeah. That was a behavior thing. It wasn't anything about the stuff that was feeding that. Clearly, as we know now, he had a body image, a problem. He didn't like his body. He didn't think he was loved. He had OCD. We used to play basketball in the driveway every day, and he would take the ball and he'd have to hit his shin twice, and he'd tap the ground before he shoot his three throws. And we were like, "What is your problem?" We would laugh at him, but it was clearly OCD. Even through SNL and stuff, people were like, "What's your brother with the tapping thing?" I'm like, We didn't.
It's just Chris.
Wasn't well. It was undiagnosed, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. I mean, but and back in the day, it was just like, oh, you've got an addiction now. We get treated, and we treat it like a broken leg, and we fix it, and you're off the races.
So was that the same with Hazelton at that time? Have they evolved as well? Did they treat the symptom, which was
the best thing that Chris ever did, where really he went into so many programs, but I'll never forget when he was on his third year in SNL. I'd seen him come back from treatments before over the summer, but this time, because I was working in New York at the time, and he came back and he had a nice, beautiful apartment on Riverside Drive up on the west side, and instead he came out of Hazelton, and for his third year on SNL, he went to, they had a sober living house in Lower Manhattan that he was on TV every weekend, but every night he was checking back into his cot for a whole season on SNL.
Wow.
Working his recovery program, and that's when he just became the funniest. He just exploded because he was working his recovery program. He didn't just get out of treatment and say, I'm cured.
Yeah.
He kept
He was
working it.
Is this while he had his apartment on Riverside?
Yeah.
And he'd go into sleep on a cot?
Yeah.
That's dedication right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That means he really wanted it.
Yep, he absolutely. And the first thing I noticed, that he was dressing better. So that was that's what recovery for me was. I'm like, all right, good job, Chris. You're getting the hang of this.
The collar was a little neater.
Yeah, you know what? But I can't take credit for it. I tried to be the example, but you know who it was? It was Chris Rock. Chris Rock finally came to Chris and was like, dude, man, you're making too much money to dress like that. Here's this guy from Bed-Stuy, New York, teaching my brother how to dress. He's like, took him down to Barney's and said, and just like, I'm like, Chris, where'd you? He goes, yeah, Rock bought this thing, made me buy this tie. I'm like, all right, well, good for you, man.
How was it growing up with Chris? Was he always funny?
Not to me.
So frankly, getting to know this family, they're all pretty funny.
Oh,
we were all. Chris always went a little farther. We were all really funny. My dad, mom, sister, all of us. But Chris would take it always too far. Sometimes, and it was that much funnier until it was like, okay. And for me, as the oldest of the boys, that always just embarrassed the crowd. I'd be like, oh, now it's this. And my friends would be laughing hysterically, and I'd be like, don't laugh at him. Stop.
You're encouraging him.
Oh, gosh.
So now that the stigma is broken a little bit, I want to say a little bit. Maybe it's a lot. But I say, like you and I both experienced that trauma of losing someone we love to suicide. And I told you that awful example of what happened to my mother-in-law at post, but because people are still, very ignorant about suicide and mental health, but there's a lot more options out there. And so you would think, to your question, that there would be a lot more help given for people of all stature. That's unfortunately not the case. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is that federal money is being given to the states. The states are now, and this is, per time, right? I'm learning as we go here, but, and the states are passing it to the counties, and the counties are just kind of going, here's a little money to this organization, here's a little money to this organization. There's no congruence and a formulated plan to any of the money being given. So it's a problem in the fact that there is money out there. There is money being given to the federal government, from the federal government to the state levels, but there is no plan to actually address it, to actually cure it at its root.
I think the you know how when a doctor tell you symptoms to illness, no one talks about mental health. I just learned, like when he was saying how his brother would tap the ball twice or hit it on his chin. You see people doing OCD stuff, but you don't know that's a symptom of something, so you don't try to get it fixed. But if people came on TV more and talked about it, like I just learned that from him, and then I'll be like, oh, my buddy does that all the time, or he has to go back and wipe something off, and then you notice you can kind of notice a problem, and then you can try to get a remedy for it. But if it goes unnoticed, it's like a word without a dictionary. You don't know what it means, So I think you need to talk about it more.
I've been in schools, and one of the things I leave them with is what I learned when I was out in New York, and I saw Chris was, struggling, and the rest of my family was in Wisconsin. And this was before 9/11, so it wasn't a term, but I was a first responder. I've been like, but I, as an older brother, thought I had to solve it and come up with a solution and be that older brother. I didn't. I just needed to connect with them and listen to them and empathize with them. So I got that a little wrong, but I was there. But I tell kids, you be a first responder. Look at your peers and your friends who looks like they're struggling or isolating.
Yeah.
And because if you don't, someday in the future, you're going to remember that moment, and you're going to feel that's a trauma now that you have to carry.
Live some guilt.
I have it.
Yeah.
I have that.
We all do. We all can look back at something like,
I should have, would have, could have.
I should have done that.
Yeah.
And to avoid, I tell kids, don't get there. It's not, then you're going to have to deal with that. And a lot of times we deal with it in an unsafe, I drank because I had those kind of things.
Yeah.
I think everyone goes through that, though.
No,
Every time
it's
we
different
lose a person, you always say, I wish I would have stepped in at one point.
Well, life is about as you mature, you're collecting trauma along the way. You don't know you're doing it, but you're and sometimes it bubbles over, and you have to deal with it either in therapy or something unhealthy and unsafe.
Yeah.
But we're always collecting traumas.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
The problem I just want to, and I've told many people this, and it's so hard to put into words for someone that hasn't experienced suicide to someone they love dearly. It's a different trauma. It's a different death. And Tom's hitting on the point there is because you're stuck with all these what ifs. Mm-hmm. And you're stuck with all those moments that you could have been like, where for me, before my father-in-law took his own life, which was just over 5 years ago now, the last time I saw him was Christmas time. We were down in Indiana, and he was in a bad way. And I was, he pulled me into the laundry room because he didn't want my wife to hear, or his wife, my mother-in-law, to hear what he was saying to me. And we were in there for 2 hours in this laundry room behind a door talking. And
you remember that last conversation like yesterday.
And that wasn't the last conversation, but it was the conversation that I didn't recognize.
Yeah.
Because the conversation I didn't recognize that I needed to be more than what I was in that instance.
Well, a natural thing is you hear somebody in pain and you want to eliminate, that's,
I was trying to fix a business problem.
Yes.
I was trying to fix a business problem, and it wasn't a business problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't a business problem.
Part of my job, I listened to we had a webinar, kind of a staff meeting, and this woman came on and talked to us about suicide and, how we're supposed to talk about it, what's the new terminology, all that kind of stuff. And I don't like to say, I don't really tell the story much because it doesn't go over well with a lot of groups. But I was just kind of like fading in, and I was like, looking at the ceiling. And then I heard her say, and she goes, well, you know what the neat thing about suicide is? And I went, what the hell? What happened? And I'm like, what is going to come out of her mouth next? And she said, the thing about it is, at that time of that ideation, you can talk them out of it. You can talk somebody out. You can't talk somebody out of addiction. You can't talk somebody out of cancer. But when that time, the chances of you being there at that time. But the point is, you can talk somebody out of it. But the key is you need to have that conversation. You need to be in that connection. You can't. People can't do it alone.
Yeah,
that's the beautiful thing about connection is you can stop something even like that, and then hopefully get them help. But that's how powerful connection is.
You have to be educated on it, though. When you have a blueprint, like when you know
to solve the problem, yes.
No, but you have
not
to be
connect.
No, you have to be educated on the signs of someone that's going through that. Like if you know,
it's not always in their faces.
Like what I know right now, I lost a friend this summer from suicide. What I know right now, the last phone call he made was to me. I saw the symptoms, but I just didn't know. I had talked him out of suicide before.
Mm-hmm. Well,
God rest Doug's soul. But the last day he lived, he called me at 11 o'clock at night. Now that I'm educated on mental health and stuff, I would do better. And if I ever come across that again, He called me and I was like, what are you doing, Doug? He was like, I'm going to take a ride on his motorcycle. He was like, I'm like, it's kind of late. I'm saying to myself, and I could hear it in his voice, but I got to live with it. I should have stepped in and been like, Doug, let me meet you somewhere. But I didn't do that. You know, now I'm more prepared. Now I know better. I have a better blueprint. I could have at least tried. I hung up the phone. I was like, well, I'll call you tomorrow. That was the last phone conversation.
You're never ready for that moment either.
Right. But I know better now. I would have at least attempted. I don't have to live with that regret of saying, I didn't try hard enough. If you give it your all, it's a different feeling giving it your all. But hanging that phone up, I heard it in his voice, something wasn't right, you know. So by getting educated on the solutions or problems that people go through, that's why people need to talk about it more. So people may pick up a sign and say, hey, I listened to that podcast, and they're talking to a buddy and they're talking kind of reckless, and they'll say, you step in at that time. You don't hang the phone up. You go try to get a cup of coffee and talk to that person. Maybe they just need someone to talk to that night. So education about mental health is very, 100%. Very important. I was coming into this podcast today like, we're going to talk about mental health. This is really enlightening. It's like people need to hear about this.
People need to care about it too.
Yeah.
They not only need to hear about it, they need to care about it because it affects all of us. Mm-hmm. Or it will affect you if it hasn't affected you yet. Either be your own mental health or someone you love.
I mean, that should be the lesson of COVID, you know. All of a sudden, the whole world, you know, understood what it felt like to be isolated and disconnected. There are people in our communities, in our schools, sometimes even in our families, that have felt that way every day of their life. The rest of the world felt it for 18 months, and they got in fights in Walmart. They got kicked off of planes. You know, they didn't like that disconnection, and I think that's where we need to. It's not just in those, you know, situations to prevent something. It's like we should all be connecting.
It's educational. We're not educating our kids enough.
Well, hold on. You don't need education to be a connector.
Mm-hmm. No. Education of seeing signs. Like I'm going to tell my kids, if you see a kid at school that's sitting way in the corner and they're withdrawing from, go join them, talk to them, invite them over for dinner, go hang out, try to go to the arcade, go to a movie. That's education. Educate. I'm getting educated right now because I'm telling my nieces, my nephews, you don't talk about the kid that's sitting alone at the table. Go try to find something in common with them and try to make life better for that person. Because sometimes all they need is someone else to just join them and hang out with them.
So I agree with you. And it's not always the lonely kid.
Right. Yeah. It could be the most popular
Chris
kid.
Wasn't the lonely kid. Chris was
not at all.
Chris was the popular kid. Yeah. My father-in-law was the most generous person you'd ever meet, with a smile on his face and giving away money left and right to charities and people that needed it.
But look at the jewels you're dropping. That's why people need to learn about this. See, I'm sitting here thinking it's the lonely kid. It may be the most popular kid.
It's not. So you think about Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain. I mean, all the famous people we could list off.
Everything.
Well, even, you know, I'm in recovery now, you know, and I never, understood how much in isolation I was. And I was a Farley. I was out there all the time. But I didn't feel comfort. I didn't feel any sort of connection. And because I didn't feel, I was putting out this, well, they want to see this, jovial, fun guy.
With great really glasses.
With killer, on point. So I was putting out this thing that I thought everyone wanted to see, but I knew it wasn't me, and that I had trouble with that, so I drank. And now I'm in my recovery community. I sit in rooms full of men a lot of times talking about, like, the way we process shit and stuff. Men don't do that.
Right.
And now I feel like, okay, these people accept me. I trust them. They trust me. That's what it's supposed to feel like.
What do you think helped you the most with going into recovery? What's like one of your biggest things that help you get over it?
Well, I had done, when Chris died and I started going to schools, I had stopped. I said, I got to stop drinking. So I had little kids, and I had a real job. And so I would stop drinking. I would get like 5 years, without drinking. But that's all I did. And I would go to a couple AA meetings, and I would always find, just like within my family, when there's always somebody you can point to that's drinks more.
It's worse than you.
Yeah, like, I guess I'm okay.
That's an excuse.
And our family did that with Chris. Like, well, we're not that bad. I guess we're okay. Now we're all, don't drink. But
it's still funny in the serious conversation.
So, and then, like a St. Patrick's Day would come along, and my mind would tell me, like, you could have one Guinness. You've been sober for 5 years. And I would have that one Guinness, and the next thing I know, I'm back on varsity. Like, what happened? And I would do that again. I did that a couple times, 4 or 5 years. And then I went back. I got tired again just before COVID. And I went into, an AA meeting, and instead of looking who drinks and what they do, I'm like, I think like that. I do that behavior. I started looking at, it was the, being sober gave me the clarity to work on the mental health.
You started seeing yourself in those others.
With the stuff that was driving why I was drinking. I was talking about, and so that was the difference when it stopped being about the substance or the addiction or the drinking. It became about, why are you doing this? The mental health.
Learning that just because you're not as bad as that guy, it's okay.
And connecting to a community, a recovery community.
Learning how to solve that Rubik's Cube.
Just being connected, and the thing is and I tell this to a lot of AA groups, I'm not here because I want to spend the rest of my life with you people. Believe me, I don't. But you teach me and remind me what it feels like to be connected and trusted and accepted, which I completely do with that group. Now when I go out into, the outside world and I don't feel that same thing I do in my recovery community, I know, like, okay, I don't have to impress, I don't have to be somebody else anymore. I can just be myself. And I don't have to put pressure on myself to entertain people or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I want to bring up a couple topics on this same vein, because I had a conversation with Kevin Hines, who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and now his life's mission is to get to zero suicide across the globe. And he armed, in the spirit of education, he armed me with a few things. He wants to get away from mental health and talk about brain health, talk about brain pain. Because we have a negative connotation around mental, like a mental institution or being mental, or there's a negative connotation around it, right? So if we're truly trying to end the stigma, we got to start talking brain health and brain pain versus mental health, because people automatically have that negative connotation with it. So I thought that was really powerful. Thought I'd bring up the other piece of it that he armed with, and maybe you know these questions, Tom, but for Emmanuel's sake, and I think I'll get them right, but the 3 questions armed to ask people if you're in a situation like what your buddy calls you is, have you thought about killing yourself? Mm-hmm. Have you thought about how you'd kill yourself? And do you have the means to kill yourself? Mm-hmm. And you're saying kill. Like you're using the words purposely because you're trying to draw out the real.
There's a 4th. Are you a Republican or a Democrat? No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
Because that matters so much in life, right? What team are you on? Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
That may affect the other 3, but no. That you're absolutely right.
So, what do you think about? You're now armed with those questions.
Yeah, those are great.
Could you ask those questions to someone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wish I would have asked those questions that night.
Same here.
Because it just really hit home. Because the first time he wanted to do it, I was like, Doug, I love you, man. You got a lot of people out here love you. And he cried to me, and he was like, thanks, E-Man. You really helped me out.
Another thing that I learned on this. This woman was really good. She said they interviewed people that had survived that.
Survived suicide? Or attempt or
whatever they call it. Yeah. I'm sorry. But she said one woman described it as, it's like you're in a burning building room, and there's flames everywhere, and there's one door, and above it says suicide. What do you do? That
makes sense.
That's where you are.
Yeah.
That's where you are. Like you only see that door. That's the only way out of all of this. And we have to empathize for that, and we have to okay, and start there.
Yep. Kevin refers to that as terminal emotional pain.
Yeah.
Right. So that you get to a point where that is the only way out. Yeah. And I know in my father-in-law's case, he was in so much pain that he saw that as the only way out.
Yeah.
I want to be the guy with that fire extinguisher and unlock a bunch of other doors. I'm there's a different way.
Yes.
There's a different way.
I think we would all love to be that in someone's life. Now, it's not like a hero complex. It's an actual, just loving. Like we talked about in our in our calling for unity in our last, one of our last leadership and reviews, Emmanuel and I were talking about unity and quitting the identity politics because, Jesus called us to love. And whether you believe in Jesus or not, that message is still king. Love conquers hate.
Absolutely.
And so if we're truly trying to connect, if we're truly trying to fix things, it is through love that we do that. And as you were talking about before with COVID, there's also a perfect storm with social media. Right? So social media and all these apps is beautiful as technology is, and by the way, AI, I believe, is going to make this way worse. Mm-hmm. So for all of you listening, as cool as ChatGPT may be right now, AI will make this lack of connection way worse if you don't actually get purposeful about connecting with real human beings.
Yeah, it's funny. My daughter is almost turning 30. She's out in New York. She has got muscular dystrophy. She's in a wheelchair. And she said that's a conversation going on in the disabled communities is this metaverse, it's going to give us, freedom. But a lot of people are no, we're trying to get into the world. We're trying to be accepted.
Yes.
We're so marginalized, and we're just seeing opportunities for us. And you want to marginalize us further with this stuff.
Yes.
That's the last thing we need.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So and then you have, what's going on, and I don't know if you have the stats on this, Tom, but suicide rates of teenagers has gone through the roof. And particularly through COVID, we don't even have the latest stats on this yet because they're still tallying shit, but it's gotten so bad. So you have this congruence of technology, isolation from COVID, and then not getting the proper help coming out of it. It's a big problem.
It is, and what I say oftentimes when they bring out these suicide statistics, and they're devastating schools, communities, families. I'm that statistic. That's an end statistic.
Yes.
Do you know how much pain is leading up into just that one thing? So don't focus on that. That is just an indication of all this work
that's a lag indicator, as we call it, not a leading indicator, right? So you're absolutely right. That is such a good point, because I just had a friend that lost his 8th grade daughter, and it's just absolutely tragic, and our hearts just absolutely break for them. Jeez. Because all of us being parents, we can't imagine that pain.
It hurts so bad.
It's the worst nightmare for any parent to bury any child under any circumstance. So the point there is we got to get our kids off social media to the best that we can. We got to educate them. We got to connect with them at an even deeper level, and to the extent that we can. If guidance counselors aren't cutting it, which we know they're not, do they need to have a therapist?
Yeah.
Right? Do ask yourself these questions. Can you lead by example by having your own therapist, and show your children that this is okay? Hey, Tom, Tom goes, I go to AA, and this is how it's helped my life. Right? I go, hey, I not only have a personal business coach, I also have a therapist in my life, because I've gone through some trauma shit too. And we all stack these traumas, and we need outlets.
To your point, we all, if you're fortunate enough to have insurance, you have, well, even if you're on, socialized resident, it's mandatory you have a primary care physician.
Correct.
Well, okay, that's great if something goes wrong, but even those have to refer. Maybe we need primary care physician and a primary care mental health professional. Absolutely.
I love that as a solution.
Both. You have to have both.
Yeah. And frankly, especially as men, now it would probably be, again, with the stigma, a little bit tougher for us to, I don't know if it would. I'm saying that, I'm just thinking, most of us young men don't go and see a primary care physician as it is because we're young and healthy, right?
So
and
healthy,
don't need it. But if we had a therapist that we could talk through some shit in a trusted environment, us young men might actually see that person more than our primary care physician.
Especially if you're allowed to do it virtually, to be able to just check in on your phone, like, how you doing? Like, you know what? All right, then we got to make an appointment. That's so, that would be so, I don't know.
Boom, we came up with two great solutions here already today to solve the world's problems.
It's such a stigma though when they say mental health, especially in the black community. It's just, they don't want to deal with it. They sweep it under the rug. And like I said, the lack of communication, and people only want to talk about it when it hits home. You should get in front of it. Like the LeBron Jameses of the world, Barack Obama. You have to stress it out. It's not it happens to a lot of people, and you don't want to be the person that say, if I knew better, I would do better. Get ahead of it. A lot of people don't want to get, like, I'm learning right now. I'm going to be way more kinder. If I see the guy in front of a store panhandling, I'll sit and talk to him. How you doing? How was your day? So I've learned a lot today. It's not a sexy subject, but it's something that needs to be talked about, especially in the black community. It's such a stigma. You just can't give an aspirin to someone that's going through something like that.
Why do you think that is, E? Why in the black community is it worse?
The black community feel like it can fix the problem by not talking about it. You have to talk about it, and being uneducated about treatments and stuff like that. It's not just, it goes up to the government, it goes up to the hierarchy people.
Okay, is it lack of trust?
That's a lack of trust, but if you don't talk about something and you don't understand like symptoms or people going through stuff, being uneducated on something, you don't even know how to recognize the problem. And I think that's a problem within itself. You have to talk about it. I came into this door uneducated about mental health. I thought this was going to be such a boring subject. That's probably why I was late.
Not with this kid.
But no, this is so interesting. And you hear about this and you start seeing maybe someone in my family, maybe I need to talk to that person a little bit more.
We talk, and we have for years, that mental illness and substance abuse are diseases of isolation. We know that. We talk about it all the time. They're diseases of isolation. Mm-hmm. But we don't talk enough about the flip side of that is we cannot heal in isolation. It requires connection. Mm-hmm. It requires talking.
Yeah.
Talking about and eliminating shame, eliminating guilt, self-doubt and all that
and
stuff.
Giving hope. There's medications, there's hope. A lot of people go through bipolar, and the people see them going through but have no clue what they're going through. And then a lot of people feel like they're just in an abyss, like out there in the ocean with no row or no rescue. But then if you know about mental health and stuff like that, you can talk to that person, say there is help, and then you can tell them you probably feel like you're in a burning building with no exit. And a lot of people feel like that, but trust me, there's someone who can open those doors and put those fires out. All you have to do is listen and try to get some treatment. But a lot of people
picked up some great language today.
Yeah, I picked up the burning.
You're quick on it.
But no, that is so true, man, and I'm gonna do way better, man. Like, I used to walk past people that's like suffering from stuff, and it's like such a stigma. Like, I'm gonna go around and no, I'm gonna engage. How you doing today?
Here's the thing, and here's our challenge in Wisconsin. Is it's kind of in our DNA to be nice to people, and we're really good at it. But you know how deep that goes? This deep,
inch deep, mile wide,
deep, and we don't do. I expect you to be nice to me.
Midwest nice, yeah.
But the real work is below that. And there's so much that we can be doing than just being nice.
Are you willing to give a helping hand, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more to being nice.
Yeah,
it's more to being nice, and it really, like, this is making so much sense. Like, I had a buddy, really good friend of mine. She lives in Dallas. She was going through the roughest time, and she called me one night. She was like, "I feel like I'm losing it. I feel like I'm losing it," and her husband wasn't supporting her or anything. But I called her every morning, every day, until, "Are you feeling better? Let's take a walk. We can FaceTime. You can take a walk," and she's doing so much better now because her job and everything was just caving in on her, you know, postpartum and all of that stuff. And a lot of people look past that, but people need support at that time. And that's one time I did the right thing. You know,
when COVID started, I had to, do something, get out of whatever. So I started going on walks. It was horrible. So I started going on walks just to get my head out there. And when I would get like a text from somebody, how you doing?
Call them.
100% every time. Yeah. They go, "Oh shit, you called me." I'm like, "Well, yeah."
You're a boomer, so.
I needed that, yeah. And if it was my kid, they wouldn't pick up, so it doesn't matter. You just texted me. Like,
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned your daughter too, and like, that's the other thing that I think is really hard with this topic is your daughter's in a wheelchair due to MD, right? Not MS. That we can see that. We can empathize, right? The brain health, we can't.
It's invisible.
Yeah. And so that's the hard part. That's why the connection's so important, because you don't know until you know how things are going, where they're really at. It seemed like with such, keep going back to your brother, because he's such a jovial person. And we talked about this in our original podcast. What I love about your brother's legacy, and because you've been such a big part of it, is like, he's still talked about and revered today.
Oh, it is. But
whether it's Chris Rock, Sandler, all these guys, or just even the memes and gifs still of him that circulate.
Everywhere. That's helpful to me. But you know what? One of the things I've been telling, especially Wisconsin audiences now, is, first of all, acknowledging that I love it. It's been very helpful for me, my family, to just see that Chris was loved. So much. And I appreciate that he's kind of our guy. He's Wisconsin. He just showed the world what we're like here, which is freaking great, because we're all Chris Farley for in some point. But I said the thing is now what I won't kind of accept anymore is that you cannot love my brother, you cannot love Chris and cherish his memory and his humor and still carry the stigma and perpetuate the stigma of the disease that killed him. I won't take that anymore. That I stop. And we do that. We make fun of this drinking culture that we have here in Wisconsin. It's funny. It's like, you know what? That's not acceptable anymore.
I've started talking about that more, Tom, because I did 75 hard last year. I know exercise isn't your thing, but
I'm fine.
You're complaining about doing walks during COVID. I had to toss that out there.
That cell phone was getting heavy.
So I did 75 hard last year. I made a run this year before this illness got me, but it's interesting because, so first of all, we tout, right, of the 50 drunkest counties in the U.S., only 9 are located outside Wisconsin. Yeah. And we tout that. We brag about it.
It's funny as hell.
And so we going on spring break to Mexico, they wouldn't let Team Wisconsin compete. This was in Cancun in 2001. They wouldn't let us compete because
they all American
varsity drinkers. But so we wear that as a badge of honor. Yeah. And so what was interesting about me going through 75 hard and not drinking for 75 days straight, because I had never done that since I was 18 years old. Right? Think about that. Yeah. Never. Probably never more than 30 days during a dry January or whatever. Yeah. Because that's how we stay warm in the winter.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is we got to make not drinking
cool,
or just normal.
Yeah.
Not even cool, just normal.
Yeah. Well, and I tell that to when I go into schools too. I go the two biggest myths is when you start to go down that road is I'm going to lose all my friends and I'm not going to have any more fun. And I'm telling you maybe. You need better friends, and for me, you're not going to tell a Farley he's not going to have fun anymore. I mean, especially the taverns in Wisconsin. I mean, that is so us. That's like the Irish pubs. Like, tell me, I'm never going to go in there again. No, I go. I have no problem going into pubs and taverns because I'm there for the right reasons. I'm there because I the people. But when I get the fifth person coming up to me like, I love your brother, you're so great. Like, all right, it's time to go. Yeah. I know when it's to go now.
Yeah.
It's not about drinking anymore for me, but you can still have fun.
Yeah.
You can still enjoy all Wisconsin has to offer. It doesn't have to be, this excessive.
Well, and the other thing that probably rubs you the wrong way in, because I know, because we've had many conversations about this, is that was the type of person that Chris was trying to make laugh when he was drinking. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like, he thought he needed to impress or make a funny for the drunk person in the bar and be someone that he's not and take himself over the edge, which he didn't have to. But
yeah, even when he was sober, when he was in recovery, he felt he always had to be that person,
Yeah.
Speaking of drinking, though, you can have been drinking like a year, but you can find substitutes from drink for other than drinking. Like, I like to work out now. That's my drinking. But to piggyback on what you said earlier about some things are physical and you can't see the mind when it's going through something. That's why it's so important to get educated about mental health, because you can see the signs. You can't read their mind, but you can see the signs when someone's getting depressed or withdrawn from something. So that's the part about being educated about, you can see the telltale signs. As far, like when he was saying his brother to do these little things, when you could start seeing signs. It's like being a doctor, being educated. They can see symptoms,
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to get educated about mental health, because you may be able to save someone. You could see when your friends are getting into a depression or getting into a funk, and that's when you step in and be the best you can be and the best friend you can be.
So. Yeah, OCD is a form of anxiety.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And so, I have ADD, and I always say how closely OCD and ADD, I have some OCD tendencies because of my ADD. It's really weird when they come out, because I'm usually a scatterbrain, but like there's certain things I am OCD about. And so, but my ADD is definitely an anxiety driven thing as well. And so those that have it bad, sometimes it takes one to know one, right? Maybe that's why we get along so well.
Exactly. There you go. So, I knew there was something.
So you can pick up the symptoms of someone that's ADD.
My dad is super OCD, so I can see the opposite side. You can see the symptoms. Not always. Some people have it far more severe than others, right? Yeah. But again, it's about connection and about being a human and just loving on people. That's the thing. And again, it's not always the person that's being isolated and over in the corner. It can be just your jovial, generous friend as well. Yeah. That's just suffering in silence when they get so they can be, one way in public and they go home and they're an utter wreck. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's just understanding that as a whole. Well, I want to make sure that we wrap up here and not take too much time. I think we came up with two great solutions, one on the school shooting side. Yeah. And one, I love Tom's idea. If we got a primary care physician, of having a primary brain health physician as well. Yeah. And you think about the job opportunities that could be created from that, and a whole new, I wouldn't say field because there already exist, but far more of them would exist if it was mandated in that regard.
100%. I think so.
I think they're trying to tap into that right now, though. Like, you get calls from health coaches now when you go to the doctor. They'll just call you voluntarily, like, I'm a health coach. How's everything going? And they ask you questions. How do you feel? Do you feel suicide? They ask you that now. So they're tapping into that.
Interesting. Yeah. I haven't gotten that call.
Yeah. Well, I just went and got that alien probe, that colonoscopy.
Oh yeah, you're getting old.
Yeah.
The alien probe.
I got the alien probe.
Can I tell you my colonoscopy story?
I'm sure it's going to be good.
It's great. So when it was my turn, so I went to the doctor and I said, all right, well, here's your kind of, your powder, put it in a Gatorade, and then just, hang on tight for the rest of the, then it's, we'll see you tomorrow. And so I drove home from the doctor's right to Rocky Rococo's. I had 3 super slices. There's the most guilt-free, and like this is gonna last like 10 seconds in my body. This is gonna be great. So that's the Farley mindset. It's like, wow, great, it's all gonna get flushed out. All right, I'll have 3. Thank God I had ice cream too, because that saved me.
You lucky you don't know about that yet. It's liquid.
I've heard plenty about it.
Yeah, it's
I got a few years before that kick, so I'm supposed to do it. I could always do it early. But that's another thing is, my wife and I plan to go up to Mayo. A lot of people don't necessarily know this, for the executive physical.
Yeah.
And Mayo's not the only one that does it, but they're the closest to us. That's
Smart.
extremely reputable place. Smart. And I think it I could be wrong, but I think it's around $6,000. It's not necessarily if you're not covered by insurance.
Yeah.
It's about $6,000. So it's not inexpensive by any means, but it could be well worth it. Something for someone to save towards. It'd certainly be more worth that than buying something stupid. That many of us buy, new TV or whatever it might be, definitely worth it.
So this is like a diagnostic check for
full diagnostic, head to toe. I had a good friend actually that they caught a tiny spot on his lung.
Wow.
Non-smoker, didn't even smoke cigars, just perfectly healthy. He was about 40 years old at the time. They caught this tiny spot on his lung that could have metastasized and saved his life. It did.
Wow.
They were able to go in and fix it right away. So I want to throw that out there for anyone that possibly can afford that or would want to save towards that. Those things that you can do that some of these hospitals that you most don't know. I'm sure Cleveland Clinic and some other big reputable hospitals do these executive physicals. But that's what it's called. My wife and I are going to do that and plan to do it maybe every 2 years, 3 years, something of that nature, just to stay on top of things.
So I've been getting a Hyundai checkup all this time. Fuck.
Well, the problem is that the medicine is very reactive, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So unless you have symptoms of something, then you go in, right? Yeah. Or you notice something, whereas this is like trying to be preemptive.
Mm-hmm. Proactive. Mm-hmm.
This is very proactive in their approach, so that's where they offer it out. And so for those that are listening that may want to check that out as well, look it up. I would definitely recommend it. I got some good friends that have done it. Obviously, I had a friend that saved his life, so definitely something to look at. All right, y'all. So you know what to do. Share this episode. Mr. Farley, thank you for your time coming on today.
Yeah, this was fun. I did not expect this. This was good.
Well, this leadership and review.
Good conversation. This is a real conversation.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to have, again, across America. Yeah. When Emmanuel and I, tossed around this idea, it was at a cigar bar at the tasting room.
Yeah.
Again, they still need to get us some advertising royalties over this way, but either way, I was like, why do we have great conversations in a cigar bar from all socioeconomic classes, political aisles, whatever, and you can walk out being respectful and friends? And it doesn't happen, especially online. So again, we're trying to be the example here and show y'all how to have a tough conversation in a respectful manner over a great cigar and walk out friends.
One last plug. Jason, when you hear this episode, you're going to have to start supplying us with our weekly cigar. Since we're plugging you, we're going to give the viewers the weekly cigar that you supply us with. So,
oh, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We'll have the cigar plug, Mr. Smith. All right, y'all, you know what to do with this episode. Share it. More people need this information, just like Emmanuel and I learned from Tom today. We want everyone to know of what is important with brain health in this Mental Health Awareness Month of May. Make sure you're spreading this message far and wide. Remember, good and great are the enemies of possible.
Mental health is mental wealth. It
That's
really
right.
is.
Ooh, they're the new line.
Damn.
Lead like a Spartan today.